John had been walking alone on the surface of a barren planet for hours. The sky above was gray, and the air was thin. This was supposed to be a routine mission, just another day in the life of a Marine. But nothing had prepared him for what he would find. His mission was simple: survey the area and report any signs of enemy activity. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was necessary. The planet was isolated, distant from any major battles, which made it the perfect place to send someone like John. As he walked across the rocky terrain, he checked his equipment. Everything seemed fine, but his instincts told him something was off. A strange noise cut through the silence. John stopped in his tracks. The sound was faint at first, like a low hum in the air. But it was there, just enough to make his skin crawl. His eyes scanned the horizon, trying to locate the source. He wasn't alone. Someone or something was out there. The wind blew harder, and the hum grew louder. It wasn't natural. Something was wrong. With a quick glance at his watch, he saw that it was already past the time he had planned to return. But John had never been one to ignore his instincts, so he decided to follow the sound. He moved cautiously, keeping low and making sure his footsteps didn't make a noise. The last thing he wanted was to attract attention. The rocks beneath his boots were sharp, and every step felt like it could be his last. The deeper he went into the canyon, the more intense the humming became, until it was almost deafening. Then he saw it. Lying in a shallow crevice at the base of a cliff was a figure, an alien woman, covered in blood and dirt. She was barely breathing, her body twisted in a way that made it clear she had been in some kind of battle. Her skin was a pale greenish color, and her long silver hair was tangled in the dirt. Her arms were limp at her sides, and her chest rose and fell with weak, shallow breaths. She had lost both of her legs. Blood soaked the ground around her. John froze. His first instinct was to call for backup, but he knew it would be too late. She wasn't going to make it. She had been left for dead. His heart pounded in his chest. He had never seen an alien like this before, but he could feel something in the air, something that made him hesitate. He looked down at his weapon, his finger itching to pull the trigger. But the alien woman's eyes flickered open, and for a brief moment, their gazes locked. She looked at him with fear and desperation. Her lips parted, but no words came out. Instead, she made a weak, pleading motion with her hand. She was asking for help. John's mind raced. Everything in his training told him to eliminate any threats. This woman could be an enemy, and if he left her alive, she could pose a danger. But there was something about her. The look in her eyes wasn't one of anger or aggression. It was a plea for mercy. The decision was harder than it should have been. He had spent his entire career seeing aliens as enemies, threats to humanity. But this alien was different. She was vulnerable, broken, and in pain. John knelt down beside her, his hand hovering over his medkit. His mind screamed at him to walk away, to leave her to die, but he couldn't. He had seen too much death in his life, and something about this woman made him want to save her. It was a feeling he hadn't experienced before, and it terrified him. He reached out cautiously and placed his hand on her shoulder. She flinched but didn't move away. Her eyes fluttered, and she let out a soft, pained groan. John's heart sank. He had no idea how to help her, but he had to try. He opened his medkit and pulled out the basic supplies he had: bandages, antiseptic, a painkiller. He worked quickly, applying pressure to her wounds and wrapping her legs to stop the bleeding. The whole time she didn't speak, but her eyes stayed locked on his, filled with gratitude and pain. She was barely conscious, but John could see the fight in her. She was a warrior, and she wasn't ready to die. As he finished, he paused and looked at her again. He didn't know who she was or why she was here, but he knew one thing for sure. Leaving her to die was not an option. His mission was to report back, but this wasn't just another mission. It was a choice he had to make. He looked around, trying to figure out what to do next. The wind howled around them, and the sun was beginning to set. John knew he had to get her out of here. But how? They were in the middle of nowhere, with no backup and no help coming. He couldn't carry her far, and she couldn't walk. She was a stranger, a warrior from a distant world, and yet she needed him. "Hang on," he whispered, more to himself than to her. With all the strength he could muster, John lifted the alien woman into his arms. She gasped, her breath shallow and weak, but she didn't fight him. She seemed to trust him, despite everything. As he moved slowly through the canyon, his mind raced. What had happened to her? Why had she been left to die? Was she an enemy, or was she just another victim of a war that no one should have to fight? But there was no time to think about it now. All that mattered was getting her to safety. John moved with urgency, his arms aching from carrying the alien woman. He couldn't believe what he was doing. The weight of her body in his arms made each step feel like a battle. His boots kicked up dust as he struggled through the rough terrain, trying to find shelter before nightfall. The last thing he needed was to be stuck out here with an injured alien and no way to protect her or himself. The canyon seemed to stretch endlessly in front of him, the jagged rocks creating an unforgiving landscape. The wind had picked up, carrying with it a chill that made John's skin prickle. He was used to harsh conditions, but this felt different. The air was thick with tension, like the planet itself was holding its breath. The alien woman's breathing was shallow, her body limp in his arms. She didn't make a sound, but he could feel her pain, her weight shifting slightly with every movement. Her injuries weighing heavily on her small frame. John had no idea how long she'd been out here. Alone, but it was clear that without help, she wouldn't last much longer. He looked around, scanning the landscape for any sign of shelter. A small cave caught his eye. It wasn't much, just a narrow opening in the rocks, but it would provide enough cover for the night. He had to move fast. As he approached the cave, John's thoughts raced. Who was this alien woman? What was she doing here? And why had she been left to die? He had no answers. But the one thing that kept him moving was the feeling deep inside him that told him he couldn't let her die. Not like this. John ducked into the cave, carefully lowering her to the ground. The alien woman's eyes fluttered. Open for a moment, her pupils dilated with pain. She looked at him, her gaze filled with confusion and fear. She tried to speak, but her words came out in a language John didn't understand. "Easy," John said, his voice soft. "You're safe for now." She didn't respond, but her gaze softened, and for a moment, it felt like she understood. John took a deep breath, wiping the sweat from his brow. He was in unfamiliar territory, both physically and mentally. He had never been this close to an alien before, let alone one that needed his help. His mind raced as he thought about his options. His mission was clear: report any signs of enemy activity. But this wasn't just an enemy. She wasn't a threat. He could feel it in his gut. But if she wasn't a threat, what was she? Why had she been abandoned here? John crouched beside her, examining the damage to her legs. The wounds were bad, very bad. Whoever had left her here had made sure she wouldn't survive. Blood soaked through the torn fabric of her clothes, and the skin around the wounds was raw and red, the flesh still oozing with fresh blood. He had no medical supplies to treat something like this. He wasn't a doctor, just a Marine trained to survive. But he had to try. The pain of losing a comrade on a mission was something John had learned to live with. But this was different. He couldn't let this alien woman die. His fingers worked, quickly pulling bandages from his pack and wrapping them around her wounds. The alien woman winced, but didn't make a sound. Her eyes stayed locked on his, wide and full of unspoken emotion. She didn't understand his language, but she seemed to trust him. That trust wasn't something John could take lightly. He spoke again, even though he wasn't sure why. "I don't know what you're doing here, but I'm not leaving you." Her eyes fluttered again, and for a moment he thought she might pass out. But then, a weak hand reached up, touching his arm. The touch was gentle, almost pleading, and it made something inside John stir. He hadn't signed up for this. He hadn't signed up to be a savior for an alien. But here he was, doing exactly that. John paused, taking in her appearance. She was beautiful in a way that was completely alien to him, her greenish skin, her delicate features, her silver hair. Everything about her was different, yet somehow she felt familiar. He could see the warrior in her. Even in this state of weakness, she was strong, even though she couldn't move, couldn't fight. Her body was broken, but her spirit wasn't. She was a fighter. He needed to do more. John couldn't leave her here alone in this cave. He had to find a way to get her medical help, to get her off this planet. But how? His mind raced again, the weight of his decision pressing down on him. A sudden sound broke through the tension. In the air, footsteps. The unmistakable crunch of boots against gravel. John's heart skipped a beat. Was it the enemy? Had they found him? He immediately reached for his weapon, ready to fight. The footsteps grew louder, and John held his breath, trying to keep his presence hidden. But when the figure stepped into the cave, he froze. It wasn't an enemy. 'Twas a creature tall, with scales that shimmered in the dim light. It was another alien, but unlike the woman John had found, this one seemed different. It didn't move like a warrior. It moved with purpose, as if it knew exactly where it was going. John's hand tightened around his weapon, but the creature didn't attack. Instead, it stared at the alien woman on the ground. Then, it turned its gaze to John. The tension in the cave was palpable. For a long moment, neither moved. Finally, the creature spoke. Its voice rough but clear. "You will not harm her, human." John's heart raced. This was it. He had no idea what was going on, but one thing was certain, he wasn't alone anymore. John's grip tightened on his weapon as he stared at the new alien in front of him. It was tall, much taller than Kira, and its body shimmered with scales that shifted in the dim light. Its eyes, a deep, unsettling shade of amber, locked onto John with an intensity that sent a chill down his spine. The tension in the cave thickened. The silence so heavy that John could hear his heartbeat in his ears. The creature didn't move forward. But neither did it retreat. It just stood there, watching John with an unsettling calm. Kira, lying unconscious on the ground, made a faint noise, her body shifting slightly as she stirred. The creature's gaze softened just for a moment, as if it was worried about her. John, still holding his weapon, took a step back. He wasn't sure if he should trust this new alien, but one thing was certain. If it was here to hurt Kira, it would have attacked already. He could see the concern in its eyes, and that made him hesitate. But what did it want? And how did it know not to attack? "You're not human," John said, his voice steady but filled with suspicion. The creature tilted its head, as if considering John's words. Then it spoke, its voice strangely melodic, though rough and alien. Neither. Are you? John's brow furrowed. What do you want? The alien didn't answer immediately. It moved toward Kira, crouching beside her. Its large hand gently reached out, brushing the hair from her face. The moment it touched her, John's heart skipped a beat. There was a strange, almost protective energy around the creature. It wasn't hostile, it wasn't even threatening. It was caring. She is my sister, the alien finally spoke. Its voice quieter now, almost reverent, and she is in grave danger. John blinked, the shock of hearing the alien refer to Kira as its sister flooding his mind. Your sister. John repeated, trying to make sense of the words. I thought you were enemies. The alien gave a low, almost amused sound. You think all of us are the same? That all who wear the same skin are bound by the same blood? No. Kira is a warrior of my people. We fight for survival, not for conquest. I come to protect, not to harm. John was taken aback by the words. This alien, this creature, wasn't what he expected. It didn't feel like an enemy at all. It felt familiar in a way that John couldn't explain. Before he could speak, the alien stood up and motioned for him to follow. We have no time. The enemies who hurt her are still hunting. You are her only chance for survival. John hesitated. He had come to the planet with a clear mission, to report any signs of enemy activity. Now, his mission had changed. It had become personal. He looked down at Kira, her breathing slow but steady. She was alive, but not for long if they didn't act quickly. What do you want me to do? John asked, the weight of his decision settling on him. The creature's eyes glowed faintly as it spoke. We must reach the sacred sanctuary. There, we can heal her, but it will not be easy. The path is filled with danger, and we must move quickly. The words hit John hard. A sanctuary, a place where Kira could heal. It seemed almost too good to be true, but he had no choice. If he didn't help her, she would die. The creature might not be what he expected, but right now, it was his only ally. I'll help you, John said, his voice resolute. But we're going to need to move fast. You've got to show me the way. The alien gave a nod. It's Amber. Eyes still focused on Kira. You may not understand our ways, human, but you must trust me. We can survive this together. John didn't have time to question how or why, so he just nodded. He reached down to gather Kira into his arms once more, making sure she was comfortable as possible, though her unconscious form was heavier than he anticipated. The journey ahead would be long, and he had no idea what awaited them. But there was no turning back now. The alien led the way, moving with an eerie grace. It seemed to know the landscape as if it had traveled this path countless times. Oh, John. On the other hand, was a stranger here, still unfamiliar with every turn, every rock. His heart raced, not only from the physical exertion of carrying Kira, but from the fear of what might come. They weren't just running from the enemies who had hurt Kira. They were running from something much bigger. Something that could change everything. As they moved through the canyon, John couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Every rustle of the wind, every shifting shadow, made him alert. The alien didn't seem to notice, or perhaps it was too used to it, but John couldn't relax. His instinct screamed that danger was close. They came to a narrow pass, flanked on either side by towering cliffs. The path was barely wide enough for them to walk side by side, and John felt the walls closing in. The sound of footsteps echoed faintly from behind them. His eyes darted over his shoulder. He couldn't see anything, but he could feel the presence of something, someone, following them. "They're close," John said, his voice low but urgent. The alien glanced behind them briefly, its sharp eyes scanning the cliffs. Then it turned back to John. "We will be fine. Trust me." But John wasn't so sure. The air around them felt thick, heavy. Something was coming, something fast. The sound of the footsteps grew louder. Whatever was following them, it wasn't. Alone, before John could react, a blast of energy rang out from above, striking the ground just ahead of them. Rocks exploded into dust, and John ducked instinctively, shielding Kira with his body. He glanced up, and for a split second, he saw them shadowy figures on the cliffs above, their weapons aimed directly at him. "Move," the alien shouted, grabbing John by the arm and pulling him forward with surprising strength. "We have no time." John's heart pounded as he followed, knowing that their fight for survival had just begun. The rocks beneath John's boots felt like they were shifting beneath him as he sprinted, Kira still heavy in his arms. The distant blasts from the cliffside echoed in his ears, making the world feel like it was collapsing in on them. He couldn't let them catch up. Not now. Kira's life was on the line, and the enemy was getting closer by the second. The alien, whose name he still didn't know, moved swiftly beside him, seemingly unaffected by the rough terrain. John couldn't keep up with its speed, but it was patient, always a few steps ahead, guiding them through the narrow, jagged paths. The alien's eyes would occasionally glance behind them, scanning the area, watching for any sign of pursuit. John's breath came in ragged gasps, his muscles burning from the exertion. He'd never run this hard in his life. But every time he looked down at Kira, unconscious and barely clinging to life, he pushed harder. Every step he took was for her. She might be an alien, a soldier from another world, but in that moment, she was his responsibility. And he wasn't going to let her die. "Keep moving." The alien snapped, its voice sharp, but its tone urging. "They are coming." John nodded, his eyes scanning the path ahead. He didn't need to be told twice. He couldn't afford to slow down. The narrow pass they were traveling through seemed endless. It twisted and turned, the walls of rock growing higher, narrowing their route. Every step felt like it took them deeper into the unknown. And with each passing moment, the danger seemed closer. They rounded a sharp corner, and the alien suddenly stopped. John nearly collided with it, his breath coming faster. He barely caught himself before falling, but he didn't have time to think about that. The alien raised a hand, signaling for silence. John froze, his heart hammering in his chest. The creature's amber eyes glowed faintly, like it was listening for something. A low rumble vibrated through the ground. John's senses flared something was coming. A roar echoed in the distance. Not human, not anything he had ever heard before. It was a monstrous sound, raw and powerful, the kind that sent fear crawling up his spine. "What the hell is that?" John asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The alien's face remained stoic. "The beasts of the canyon. They hunt in packs. If we stay still, they won't find us." John didn't know what was more terrifying, the creatures hunting them, or the fact that he was relying on an alien for survival. He glanced at Kira, her body limp in his arms. If they didn't find shelter soon, she wouldn't make it. The alien had said there was a sanctuary, but it felt like they were so far from safety, surrounded by enemies on all sides. How long could they keep running? The rumbling grew louder, the ground shaking more violently. John's thoughts raced. The creatures were getting closer. He needed to find a way out, fast. The alien looked at him, then nodded toward a small crack. "In the rock ahead. Through there," it said, motioning for John to follow. "It will lead to the sanctuary." John didn't question it. He needed to trust something. He couldn't afford to waste time. Kira still in his arms, he pushed forward, squeezing through the narrow opening. The crack was tight, barely wide enough for him to fit, but he forced his body. The air felt heavier now, the weight of their journey pressing down on John's shoulders. Every step he took with Kira in his arms felt like it added another layer of responsibility. The alien had led them to a narrow passageway hidden deep within the canyon, and John could feel the tension growing with each turn they took. The enemy was still hunting them, and every noise seemed to carry the threat of discovery. But something about the way the alien moved so confidently through the terrain made him feel, for the first time since this whole ordeal began, that they might make it. They stopped at the base of a steep incline. The alien, who had remained mostly silent until now, turned to John. Its amber eyes glinting with something John couldn't quite place. There was a heaviness in the air, a weight to the silence that made the hairs on the back of John's neck stand on end. "We are close," the alien said, its voice calm but laced with urgency. "But there is something you must understand first." John glanced at Kira, her face pale and still. He could feel the cold sweat forming on his brow as the fear for her well-being gripped his chest. "We don't have time for explanations," he said, his voice strained. "We need to get her to the sanctuary, now." The alien gave a soft, almost pitying glance toward Kira, and then back to John. "The sanctuary is not a place for you to find peace, human. It is a place for truth, and you have yet to hear the full truth of why she is here, why she was left to die." John's eyes narrowed, his grip on Kira tightening. "What do you mean?" The alien took a step closer, lowering its voice to a whisper. "Kira was not abandoned by her own kind. She was betrayed. Her people do not fight for honor, as you might think. They fight for control, for power." John's mind spun. He had assumed that the alien species Kira belonged to was simply another enemy, another race bent on conquest. He had been taught to see them as nothing more than threats, but this alien, this being that stood before him, was changing everything he thought he knew. "She came to this planet on a mission," the alien continued. "A mission to stop her. People from starting a war with yours. But her own leaders did not want peace. They wanted to conquer your planet, to use you as pawns in their game. When Kira discovered their true intentions, she defied them." John swallowed hard. The idea that Kira, a fierce warrior, had been trying to stop her own people from committing atrocities was almost too much to process. So, she wasn't left behind? John asked quietly, trying to understand. "She wasn't abandoned?" "No," the alien replied, its voice low. "She was betrayed. Her commanders ordered her execution when she refused to follow their orders. She was cast out, left to die. But Kira is a survivor. She fought and she managed to escape, even though they left her with no legs. She could have died on this planet, but she didn't. She survived, and that is why you found her." John's thoughts raced. He had never thought about the war from Kira's perspective. He had only ever been trained to fight, to eliminate enemies. But now, he found himself seeing her as something different. Someone who had risked everything to stop a war, only to be betrayed by those she had once fought for. She wasn't a villain. She was a victim of her own people's greed and desire for power. "So, she's not the enemy," John said. his voice barely above a whisper. The alien nodded slowly, its eyes filled with a deep sadness. No, she is not the enemy. Her people, yes, but not her. Kira fought for something more than conquest. She fought for peace. She is one of the few who would rather die than see the destruction of your people. John's mind was spinning. He had spent so much time seeing aliens as enemies, fighting them, killing them, never once questioning the reasons behind their actions. But now, Kira had shown him that things were not so black and white. She had been trying to stop a war that could have wiped out millions of humans, and instead of being praised for her bravery, she had been abandoned to die. His gaze flickered back to Kira, still unconscious in his arms. His thoughts were a jumbled mess, but one thing was clear. He couldn't just leave her. Not after everything she had done. Not after all she had sacrificed. We need to get her to the sanctuary, John said, his voice firmer now. You said it was the only place where she could be healed. Let's go. The alien nodded, but there was a flash of concern in its eyes. The path ahead is dangerous. The enemies who betrayed her are still hunting her. They will not stop until they find her. You cannot protect her alone, human. You must decide. Will you fight to the end, or will you turn your back on her? John's chest tightened. He had never been a quitter, but this was different. It wasn't just about following orders or completing a mission anymore. It was about doing what was right. I'm not leaving her, John said, his voice steady. I'll fight with her. I'll fight for her. For peace. The alien studied him for a long moment before giving a slow, almost approving nod. Then, we move forward, together. They set off again, the alien leading the way with more urgency now. John followed closely. Kira's weight still heavy in his arms, but his resolve stronger than ever. The truth about her mission, about the betrayal. She had suffered, had lit a fire inside him. He wasn't just protecting her anymore. He was protecting the chance for peace, for a future where humans and aliens might one day live without the shadow of war hanging over them. But as they pressed deeper into the canyon, John couldn't shake the feeling that they were running out of time. The enemies that had betrayed Kira would stop at nothing to find her. And if they didn't make it to the sanctuary soon, it might be too late for both of them. The canyon walls seemed to close in tighter with every step, the once quiet path, now filled with the echo of their hurried footsteps. John's heart pounded in his chest as he carried Kira, her body growing heavier with each mile they traveled. He was exhausted, every muscle aching from the constant strain, but he refused to slow down. Kira was counting on him. He had to keep moving, no matter what. The alien walked ahead, its body gliding through the jagged terrain like it belonged there, its amber eyes constantly scanning the surroundings. John, on the other hand, felt every step of the journey weighing on him. The path was becoming steeper, the air thinner, and the ever-present feeling of being hunted had not eased. The enemy wasn't far behind. John could feel it in his bones. They were closing in. How much farther? John asked, his voice tight with worry. The alien glanced back at him, its face unreadable. Not far, but the hardest part is yet to come. We must move quickly. John nodded, but a knot tightened in his stomach. The sanctuary they were heading toward was their only hope. The alien had promised it was a place where Kira could heal, where they would be safe, but every step felt like it was leading them straight into danger. As they rounded a corner, the alien stopped suddenly, its body tensing. John's instincts kicked in, and he quickly dropped into a defensive stance, holding Kira protectively against his chest. The alien's eyes flashed, and it motioned for him to stay quiet. They were too close. From behind them came the unmistakable sound of heavy footsteps, the crunch of boots against the rocky ground. John's heart skipped a beat. The enemy had found them. They were out of time. The alien turned to face John, its expression hard. You must choose now, human. You cannot protect her alone. The sanctuary is ahead, but to reach it, we must confront those who hunt us. John's mind raced. The enemy soldiers were close. The alien's words weighed heavily on him. What was he supposed to do? Run for safety and leave Kira behind? Or fight, even though the odds were stacked against them? I can't leave her, John said, his voice firm. He could feel the weight of Kira in his arms, her life hanging by a thread. He had already made his decision. I won't. The alien nodded, its gaze shifting toward the sound of the approaching footsteps. Then we fight together. John's pulse quickened. He had never been one to run from a fight, but this felt different. He wasn't just fighting for his survival anymore. He was fighting for Kira's life. And as much as the thought terrified him, it also gave him a sense of purpose. He couldn't let her die, not after everything she had done, not after the trust she had shown him. The footsteps grew louder. The enemy was almost upon them. John could see them now, shadowy figures moving through the rocks, their weapons. Drawn eyes, scanning for any sign of their prey. Get ready, the alien whispered, its voice cold. We'll use the rocks as cover. Stay low. John's body tensed. He had no idea how this would play out, but he was ready to fight. Alien moved swiftly, slipping into the shadows, its movements almost too quick for John to follow. He crouched down, finding a rock to hide behind, but kept Kira close. Her body a reminder of everything that was at stake. The enemy soldiers moved past them. Unaware of their presence, their footsteps heavy and slow as they searched for any sign of movement. John held his breath, praying they wouldn't find them. He could feel the tension in the air like a coiled spring, ready to snap at any moment. Then, without warning, the alien struck. It leaped from its hiding place, moving with the grace of a predator. A sharp cry echoed through the canyon as the alien took down the first soldier, its movements precise and deadly. The soldier never saw it coming. John didn't hesitate. Sprinted forward, ducking behind rocks as he fired his weapon. The noise of gunfire filled the air, deafening in its intensity. The soldiers scattered, trying to find cover, but John kept his focus, moving in sync with the alien. Their attacks seamless and coordinated. It wasn't easy. The soldiers were well trained, their weapons powerful. But John's determination and the alien's skill made them a deadly pair. One soldier lunged at him, a knife drawn, but John was faster. He sidestepped and knocked the weapon from the soldier's hand, knocking him to the ground. The alien was relentless, dispatching enemies with brutal efficiency, moving with a speed that left John in awe. It was clear that this creature was not just a survivor, was a warrior. Every move it made was calculated, deadly, designed for one purpose: survival. As the last soldier fell, the canyon fell silent again. John stood there, panting, his chest heaving with adrenaline. The fight had been quick, but it had been brutal. His mind was still racing from the chaos, and for a moment he felt the weight of what he had just done. He had killed. He had taken lives. It wasn't something he was proud of, but he had no choice. The alien walked over to him, its eyes scanning the bodies of the fallen soldiers before turning to John. "You did well," it said, its voice quieter now. "But this fight is far from over. The real battle is ahead." John's breath was still coming in short gasps, but he nodded. "We need to get Kira to the sanctuary." The alien gave a slight nod, but its expression remained grim. "The sanctuary is only a place of healing, not of safety. We must reach it before they realize we've escaped. It is the only way Kira will survive." With that, they resumed their journey, the weight of their victory and the threat of the battles still ahead hanging heavily in the air. John knew the hardest part was yet to come. The enemies would stop at nothing to finish what they had started. But with Kira's life on the line, he was ready to fight to the very end. The air was thick with tension as John, Kira, and the alien pressed forward through the canyon. They had fought hard, but they were still not safe. The sound of pursuit was growing quieter, but that only made the silence around them more oppressive. Every shadow seemed to hide a threat, every rock a potential hiding spot for the enemy. Kira's body had grown colder in John's arms, and he could feel the weight of her life slipping away with each step. He couldn't bear the thought of losing her now, not after everything they had been through. Not after seeing the humanity in her, despite her being an alien, a warrior from a distant world. "Just a little further," the alien said, its voice steady but laced with urgency. "We're almost there. The sanctuary lies just ahead." John nodded, his eyes never leaving Kira's face. Her skin was pale, her breath shallow, but there was still a faint pulse. He could feel it, faint but steady. He wasn't going to lose her. Not now. They reached a ridge that overlooked a small, secluded valley. The sanctuary was hidden in the heart of it, surrounded by towering trees and thick foliage. It looked peaceful, almost too peaceful, like it belonged to another world entirely. John could see the ancient stone structure in the distance, tall and majestic, a place that looked untouched by time. But as they approached, John's instincts flared. Something was wrong. He could feel it in the pit of his stomach, a gnawing sense of dread that he couldn't shake. "What is it?" he asked, turning to the alien. The alien's eyes scanned the valley, and its expression darkened. "It's a trap. They know we're here." John's heart sank. He had known this wouldn't be easy, but the thought of it ending like this here, at the final stretch, felt like a cruel joke. They were so close, yet it felt like they were walking into the mouth of danger. The alien's gaze shifted toward the sanctuary, where the stone walls loomed tall and silent. "We must fight our way in," it said, its voice filled with determination. "This place holds the healing power we need, but it is protected by forces who will stop at nothing to keep us from reaching it." "Then we fight," John said, his voice hard. "We fight together." The alien nodded, its expression fierce. "Stay close to me. The sanctuary will be our last hope, but only if we can get inside." John's grip on Kira tightened. He had promised himself he wouldn't leave her, and now he was going to keep that promise. He couldn't lose her, not after everything they had been through. They had survived too much, fought too hard. This was the final battle, the last chance. They moved toward the sanctuary, each step bringing them closer to the unknown. The sound of footsteps grew louder again, and John could hear the unmistakable thud of enemy boots. The soldiers were closing in, their voices harsh and demanding, calling out to one another as they advanced. John's pulse quickened, the adrenaline surging through his veins. He had to act. There was no time to hesitate. The alien surged forward, its movements swift and lethal. It leaped into action, taking down the first enemy soldier with a well-placed strike. The battle began in an instant, chaos erupting around them as John fired his weapon, providing cover fire as the alien picked off their attackers one by one. The soldiers were relentless, but so were they. John's heart raced, his hands steady. Despite the danger, he had trained for moments like this, but nothing could have prepared him for the stakes. This was not just about survival. This was about Kira. This was about protecting someone who had become something more than just an ally. The alien moved with unmatched precision, its body a blur as it disabled one soldier after another. John stayed by its side, moving carefully, but efficiently, watching for any sign of weakness in their enemies. The soldiers were skilled, but John had something they didn't: determination. He wasn't just fighting to stay alive. He was fighting for Kira's life as they neared the entrance of the sanctuary. The final wave of enemies charged at them, a group of heavily armed soldiers who had clearly been waiting for them. John's heart pounded as he and the alien moved to intercept them. The sanctuary was so close now, but they had to fight their way through one last line of defense. The battle was fierce. The air crackled with energy as gunfire rang out, but through it all, John never lost focus. He fought with everything he had, determined to protect Kira at all costs. And then, in a moment of sheer desperation, he saw the opening. The sanctuary's door, slightly ajar, beckoning them forward. "Get inside," the alien shouted, its voice raw with urgency. John didn't need to be told twice. With Kira still in his arms, he sprinted toward the door, ducking under gunfire as the alien covered him. He reached the entrance, and as he crossed the threshold, a door slammed shut behind him. Inside the sanctuary, everything was still. The world outside seemed distant, as though the battle had never even happened. John looked around in awe. The walls of the sanctuary were lined with ancient symbols, glowing faintly with an otherworldly light. It felt peaceful, almost like a dream. The alien stood beside him, panting heavily. "We made it," it said, its voice low but filled with relief. John didn't answer. His focus was entirely on Kira. He laid her down on the cool stone floor, his hands shaking as he gently checked her pulse. She was so still, so pale. But there was a faint glimmer of hope in her chest. She was still alive. The alien knelt beside Kira, its eyes glowing softly. "This is where she can be healed," it said. "But the process will not be quick. We must wait." John didn't care about how long it took. He wasn't leaving her side. He had promised to protect her, and now that they were in the sanctuary, he would keep that promise. As the light in the sanctuary dimmed, John sat by Kira's side, watching over her. The battle was over. The war wasn't won yet, but this was a victory. Not just for Kira, but for all of them. They had fought against the odds, and they had survived. Together. And now, there was hope.